Welcome back to Sweet Pea and Bam. My name is Bam,
I'm Sweet Pea or Susie.
and welcome back. This is season 2, episode 6 of the Sweet Pea and Bam podcast. We hope you've enjoyed. Feel free to give us a like if you like this content. Subscribe if you want to see more. We are on Spotify and on YouTube and most other podcasting platforms. So, getting all of the informational stuff out up front. Today, wait, is there anything you wanted to add, Susie?
No.
Yes, and that, well, just looking at Susie reminded me, you may see we're having some new hardware, some new equipment. We're trying something new this week. So the cables are gone. We've gone wireless. And we also have a fisheye lens. We're not using my mobile phone to record. So we hope you like all of these changes. If they're not great, we can return. Obviously, we adjust. We're doing it live almost. Not really, but you know what I mean. Anyways,
One take wonder.
do you want to tell everybody what we're talking about today?
Sure. We're talking about a very controversial subject.
It is?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say so. Gender roles, especially in our very, well, maybe not, let me not get too much into the politics of it, but I think that it is a very controversial subject for sure. And so I'm sure that some people, depending on who listens, might get very heated and very upset with what we're saying. But it is what it is. So anyways, our title kind of is Balancing Gender Roles Expectations in Your Childhood version versus reality, i.e. like current, present day expectations and gender roles in our marriage.
Okay. And I guess you could say this builds on top of our immigration episode. So if you haven't listened to that one, you want a bit more context on where me and Susie come from, that would be a great resource. Long story short, I'm originally born in the UK, and I relocated myself to the United States to be married to my lovely wife, Susie. During that process, I was unable to work in the United States. I had to wait for my work visa. So that leads to maybe the clickbait title that you've seen of I had a stay-at-home husband, because I wasn't able to work a job, and I was married. So that's gonna be part of what we're talking about today. So we have a note here that we should talk about like that experience for me. I was unable to work, and Susie, she's a nurse. That's another previous episode. If you want to learn more about Susie's career, you can look back in our catalog. She was the one making all the money. So we had a flip of the typical gender roles.
Well, a flip of, I would say, what we maybe went into marriage or before marriage thought it was going to look like, which we'll go more into. But what was that like for you? Was that difficult?
Yes.
Like as a man?
It was very difficult. I was a little bit of a workaholic in the UK. In hindsight now, I used to volunteer a lot at church. I was in church maybe 3 or 4 days a week. I also volunteered at a charity for music, and I volunteered at a charity for IT support for older folks and people with disabilities. So I wasn't really good at saying no. And I think I had gotten good advice that, try and say yes to as many things as possible, try and put yourself out there, learn different things. But maybe I might have taken it a little bit overboard and not really asked for help. I probably should have. So yeah, coming to the United States was almost like everything came to a screeching halt. I kind of stepped away from church ministry. And maybe not even super intentionally, but I didn't put myself forward for anything. I was newly married. So I was like, okay, I don't need to be running around the church. And so
You also went from a very small church to a very big church in terms of like numbers of people.
Right.
Like you went to the same church organization, but like different branches of that church. And ours in Portland is much bigger. So you can not slip through the cracks, I would say, but
I
like
see what you mean.
you in a smaller church, and I think you would agree with me saying this, is that almost everybody has a little part to play or a
Sure.
big part to play. And in a bigger church, like you can just be a observer, like you can just be in the congregation and not really be part of the work and like still be established in the church.
Right.
And you know what I mean? Because obviously when you first come to church, you're not going to be right away, straight away, like first day. But you know what I mean? Does that make any sense?
It does. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Shout out to Brother Ola, my old UK pastor. It was his mission for all of the young people to be in the work somehow. So and it was a smaller church, so we didn't have a choice, like you said. There was so many needs. There's either music, there was the youth ministry, there was the technical side of things, the cameras, the audio. There was like men's committees, women's committees. You know, there's that's a whole other podcast. But like Susie said, in Portland, there are so many more hands. So it's more, you could say more evenly spread. I mean, that's potentially even debatable because since the longer I've been in Portland Church, there is this thought amongst the workers here, workers, when I say workers, I mean people who just help behind the scenes in church, that they say since it's such a big church, people don't think to volunteer because they think we have a lot of people.
Yeah.
But in reality, there's people doing multiple jobs still, even though it's at a much bigger scale.
Right.
So we went on a little bit of a tangent. I'm going to try and take myself back. I'm the king of tangents, Susie can tell you. So, yes, everything came to a screeching halt. I wasn't volunteering at church anymore. And I wasn't working a 9 to 5. It would be a problem for immigration if I was to make money via a job. Because I didn't have the right to work. I didn't want to take a job away from didn't want to take a job away from an American before I had the right to work. So we were trying to be very careful. We didn't want anything to affect our immigration process.
We were terrified of doing something wrong because it had taken so long to get where we were. And I was like, I would rather be married to you than you make money for us.
Right.
That's kind of where we were at that point. It's like, our marriage is more important than money right now.
Yeah.
So.
And we still kind of live by that.
Right.
So it was a big mental challenge and spiritual challenge for me to identify myself separately to my work, if that makes sense. My identity had been primarily in my work a lot, and maybe even more in my church work because I was a leader in a ministry and work in the church.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, I felt like I needed to be around. I needed to be, whatever needed to be done, I needed to be the one to do it. I wasn't a great delegator. And now being in the U.S., it was like, what am I if I can't work? What am I if I can't fulfill a role in church? And, it was, I had to seek God. I had to kind of build up my, I'm a husband, or even before that, I'm a child of God. I'm serving, even if I'm not serving in church, if that makes sense. Like I'm serving God by loving my wife. I'm serving God by being a good uncle, being a good friend. And I think God kind of spoke to me like, it's not your title. You don't need to be given a title to serve. You can serve in many ways. And and obviously you can serve in church as well. And that's another avenue, but it's not the only way.
For sure. I think that the verses I think about when you say that is Paul, when he's talking about the body of Christ, he's talking about how the most vital parts of the body are unseen. Like you can think about our heart, our lungs, our kidneys, our liver, like you don't see them ever. You shouldn't see them. Well, you might see them, but you shouldn't. And that's kind of, that's what you reminded me of, is that often the most important ways of serving go unseen,
Right.
potentially forever. But God sees, so that's very important note to make.
Indeed.
So
Well,
do you feel like that time like really grew your faith and your like identity into being more than just your career, and it strengthened you?
I think I grew a lot, and I started investing in friendships in a more intentional way. I mean, first I was separated from all of my long-term friends, so I kind of had a decision to make of whether, how I was going to engage with relationships. Was I going to maintain those relationships, or what was going to happen? So I think that was a big part of me. It was like, okay, hey, you're going to have to make a concerted effort to keep those relationships because it's a lot harder now with the distance.
Yeah.
But yeah, to answer your question, I think I did grow in my faith and just my perspective. that is maybe having a wider aperture, a wider view of my spiritual life, that it doesn't need to be tied to the building of church. It doesn't have to be tied to, apostolic faith. That's our church. There
Yeah.
is more, and it's not the end of the world if I don't go to church, right? I think that kind of ties into this identity piece where I was used to going to church in the morning and staying into the evening and then going to midweek services, and that was kind of just the norm for me. And breaking that cycle, because we live in a different rhythm over here. I don't get to church as often, but if my identity is based upon physical attendance in church, then I feel like I'm not being a good Christian anymore, right? Because I'm not, the number, like the attendance is not there, but I think God has spoken to me that your spiritual life is not based on your attendance. It's, you can cultivate, church. You can have church at home. You can do Bible studies at home. You can read the word together. You can sing songs of worship.
And you should.
You should. You shouldn't be.
You should do those things.
And right, as a young Christian, it makes sense, right? You're kind of learning those routines, and you need that, being under the hen's wings. You need the structure of the church to build that foundation. But as you're growing and growing, you shouldn't only be doing spiritual stuff in church.
Right. And not to say that you shouldn't go to church. Like
Right.
Paul very clearly says, do not forsake the gathering of the brethren.
Right.
So we
There's some
definitely
nuance.
say go to church. But don't let your faith be only in church.
Right.
Like let your faith grow beyond the boundaries of church, in the sense that you can't just be a Christian on Sunday or Tuesday or Friday, whatever day you go to church. It has to be every day, every moment. So that's good that you like that is true. That's an important lesson to learn. Sometimes a hard lesson to learn, because if you grew up in church, like you very much tie, like you said, your faith with being in church and things like that. And sometimes can be a little lax on making sure that your faith carries on into the rest of your life
Right.
outside of church as well. So, growing up, what were your kind of your thoughts on gender roles? Like, what was like when you thought about like the future of like getting married and things like that for yourself, or maybe even the Nigerian culture or British culture? Maybe they're different, maybe they're the same. How did you kind of see the role of the wife and the role of the husband back in your childhood?
Well, I think in our household, I mean, I can tell you what I saw, and obviously that informed my worldview. I saw both of my parents go to work. I saw my dad cook growing up, so I didn't think of the kitchen as a woman's domain. I saw my dad at the same time be patriarchal in a sense of, if my mom was home, he would usually defer to her for the cooking. So I'm not saying patriarchal in a negative sense, but there was kind of like a structure where if my mom is home, she wants to cook, and then he's gonna let her like wait on him in a way. Like she's gonna bring him his food, or we're gonna bring him his food. He's gonna ask us to bring water for him to wash his hand. He's gonna ask us for his cup of tea, and it's like, and that's the norm, and that's normal
For the Nigerian culture?
for the Nigerian culture.
Okay.
So, but then I guess what makes it less Nigerian is that my mom worked. She also had a 9 to 5 at some points. So she wasn't, and then obviously if she's working a 9 to 5, she wouldn't necessarily be able to do all of the household stuff as well.
Right.
So us kids would either help out, or my dad would even do some household stuff. And from, at least when I was super young, my dad was at home because he couldn't find a job, or he was working nights, and my mom was working. So in a way, I've kind of seen both perspectives. I've seen the traditional husband work and wife be more of a homemaker, and I've seen, and well, at least I was very young. I don't remember it, but I've heard that my dad was babysitting and my mom was working. So they lived a kind of a fusion of those lifestyles. For bringing it home to me, I was very open-minded. It didn't have to be one way or another for me. I mean, I told Susie, I think, we discussed earlier, even our dating relationship, like what did we want? What would our future look like? And Susie expressed to me that she would love to be a homemaker, and I had no problem with that. I was like, sure, if we can afford it, sure, I would love for you to be a homemaker and take care of our kids, not have to pay for childcare and raise them with the values that we want them to have. It wasn't so important for me for Susie to have her own career. and be super successful and make a ton of money. It just, by accident, it's kind of happened that way. It wasn't our plans. God, kind of threw a wrench in the plans. That's what he does. So Susie now has her career. She's very successful. She makes more money than I do. And that's how God has led our story so far. But God does allow down the road. We'd ideally want Susie to be a homemaker and for me to be the breadwinner, the primary breadwinner. And it's kind of in God's hands. I think we're just open to wherever God leads at this point.
Right.
There's no musts.
Right. Yeah, let me speak for myself because I feel like I can I don't know if anybody who's watching thinks this way, but I know for a fact that there are women out there that if they were to hear you say that, they would start prickling with anger and
this is the controversial part
feministic
that I'm not aware of. Uh-huh.
But Bam doesn't say any of that to speak over me, and like he's just saying that, but I really have other thoughts. Like I honestly probably had more of that desire coming into our relationship than you did. Like I feel like you were like, yeah, whatever, if you want to work, if you don't, you're like kind of neutral ground. Me, growing up, my mom, for majority of our lives, me and my siblings' lives, which I have 7 siblings, was a stay-at-home wife and mom, and was always there for us, like making breakfast literally almost every morning, all our meals, taking us to practices and all these things while my dad, was more the breadwinner making food. Not to say that our dad was making food, making money. Not to say that my dad was not there for us. He definitely was, but that was kind of just, it was a more very traditional gender roles, I guess you could say. And I liked it. Like it worked really well. I loved the fact that my mom was always, there in the morning and like that. And just, she was a very good mom and really good at what she did.
Oh, she is.
She is. My mom is still with us. And I love her. But she is still a very good mom. Not that she just was in the past. I say more was because my mom, because of financial hardship, did have to go back to school, which again just shows how strong of a woman she is and was back then, because she went back to school with 8 children, was like the top of her class, and then had to get a job. And so and that was before I was fully like an adult. I think that was when I was maybe like 15, 16. She had to do that. And so like I can see both sides where, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and then my mom was like more of a career woman, I guess you could say. And I don't know how other people would feel about me saying this, but like I really liked her being a stay-at-home mom because as her child, because it was just like you had your mom there with you. And I'm not saying that it was easy.
Right.
For her, but it definitely was something that as a child, like, and talking to my siblings, I think they would agree, is that it was really nice having her there with us and not having her attention divided by like, oh, I have to go to work and I have to, and I'm sure it was hard for my littlest sister because she had to be dropped off at daycare, and she didn't, she saw a different side of my mom growing up. And then eventually when when things financially settled down and we were in a recession as a country, my mom and God bless my dad with really good job and things like that. My mom again was able to go back to being like a stay-at-home mom, and that was her choice after being a career woman, like I said. And she really made that choice for my younger siblings because she wanted to be there for them like she was for the older siblings.
Right.
And she felt like, again, that it was better for her and for them. And so anyways, I grew up with that in my childhood, and I grew up with a very successful representation of traditional gender roles. And my dad respected my mom respected my dad. They took care of each other.
Right.
They loved each other. And so it was never like well, you have to cook and you're in the kitchen. That's your only role. That's all you're good for. And like, you're just a woman. You're just dumb. It was none of that. Like, my mom is so smart, and my dad knows my mom is so smart. My dad is also smart, but he always encouraged her. Like my mom actually, probably because went to school so much later, like there was such a long period of time between when she was younger, went to college as a young person, and then when she went to college as an adult with 8 kids, that I think I remember her saying that, like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm smart enough. And my dad, like, always encouraging her, like, you're so smart, like, you can do this and all these things. And so seeing, like I said, a very successful relationship play out these roles, I was like, well, yeah, that's how I want to do it. I also wanted to like be a stay-at-home mom and wife as well, because I'm like, oh, I would love to. I don't want to have kids and have someone else raise my kids. Like, what's the point then?
Sure.
Is kind of my thought, which ironically, like, God hasn't given us kids yet, and we're still waiting for Him to do that. Which you believe it will happen in faith. We're speaking, it will happen. But so that's how I kind of grew up. But then, like you said, like God has kind of made it in this way that I am a quote unquote career woman with the heart of a traditionalist, wanting to stay at home mom. But like, I'm not ridiculous in the sense that like, I'm like, well, I don't want to go to work because I don't know how to make that sound not like mean to people who are stay-at-home wives, because they can be. Because I know I'm not saying that they're just lazy or something like that, but like for me, I at this time can work and make money, so I'm like, well, I will, just because I can. I do have a position where I can flex my hours quite a bit, and I like that, because like if something happens and I want to support my family, my siblings or my parents or whatever, or your family or whatever, like I can do that.
Right.
And so it kind of fulfills both parts of
Sure.
so like I'm able to be there when I can. Like my sister went on vacation in December, for example. And so I was able to take off that time from work because, like I said, I have very flexible hours, and I was able to babysit my nephews, and like that was really valuable to me. But at the same time, like when I'm not busy and like nobody has need of me, I guess you could say, of not working and just doing something else, I can go to work and make money if we want to do things like that. So I feel like God has blessed us in that, in me having those flexible hours and stuff. But so like our life right now doesn't look like what I thought it would look like, I guess.
Right.
It's a very long answer.
Well, I think it's very valuable, and because I feel like we live an untraditional lifestyle right now,
Yes.
and I think
I
we're
think so.
we're uniquely poised to speak to both sides. People who are desiring traditional life, people who are desiring the untraditional, alternative styles of family, and showing them how to communicate their desires. Because that's our final point here. So we speak to people who are dating. We love talking about relationships. We're almost like the agony aunt and uncle here.
The what?
Agony aunt. Hey, you haven't heard of that?
What's that?
It's like a newspaper column in the UK where you can kind of write in with like a little question like, hey, I'm trying to date this guy or whatever, or my husband's been mean to me, whatever. It's kind of like, it's
An
like
advice
an
column?
advice column,
Oh,
basically.
okay.
Not that everybody's asking us for advice. We're giving
We're
unsolicited,
so wise.
unsolicited advice, basically. But so
Yeah.
so let's say we know a young girl. I mean, we probably do. A young lady who is interested in having more traditional family roles, and she's trying to communicate that to a guy. How would you advise her to go about that?
Well, I'd say just be honest, but at the same time be flexible. Like, I think with us, I was very honest with you. I was very honest with you in terms of, I think most things, we both were. And I just told you straight up, because I think like it can be embarrassing to say. It's ironic because I feel like back in the day, it was like probably embarrassing back in like, say like the 50s. It was probably awkward and weird for a wife to say like, well, I want to go and have a career and blah, 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 whatever. Now it's like the whole script is flipped. And if you say you want to be a stay-at-home mom, it's almost like down upon, like you're lazy and you're not smarter and you're just oppressed, which I don't agree with at all. But I do think there's some amount of shame built into our society in regards to stay-at-home moms.
Okay.
Like they're almost seen as, like I said, lazy and dumb, and like, well, you're just there because you're oppressed and you don't have the liberty, the freedom to think for yourself, like things like that, which is so ridiculous to me because a stay-at-home mom is one of the most challenging, fulfilling. To be a good stay-at-home mom, you have to be very smart and very like efficient and very like cunning in how you do your finances and your time and all these things. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're not just paying for someone else to take care of your child. You are doing it yourself, which sometimes is scary and it takes a lot. And I'm saying this out of a place where I'm not a stay-at-home mom, but I've seen a lot of stay-at-home moms that have done it very well. And
Right.
it is not just a job for dumb people, quote unquote. Like it is very, I totally don't subscribe to the modern idea that of the viewpoint of stay-at-home moms, I guess, as I could say for that. But so I think that telling a guy growing up in modern day 2025 at this point that I would love to be a stay-at-home mom eventually, like would probably be met with potentially scorn or belittlement, you know, like, oh, really, that's all you want to do with your life? Like, wow, how pathetic.
Well, that's useful information.
But yeah.
You're not the right one. For
Right.
Me. Let's keep on moving.
Right. So it's almost like a filter. Like you probably should tell them that just to see if you should be someone that you want to even be with at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it is met with scornfulness and belittlement and shame, putting like that, making you feel ashamed of yourself, like, I feel like that's a giant red flag. And so I feel like it just be very honest. But at the same time, like for us, like be able to be flexible, like for God hasn't given us kids yet in his own wisdom is the reason. We don't know the reason why. But despite that, I'm not telling Bam, well, I'm just not going to work because that was not like the goal that was not the vision that I had for myself. Like, I'm just going to be a stay-at-home wife and not work. That's not going to be an option. Like, you have to be flexible because, like, if I was like that, would our marriage have even succeeded? I don't know because you weren't able to work for a while.
Right.
So I had to work. I had to be the breadwinner. I was basically thrust into a role that I didn't necessarily want to be in.
Sure.
But because I care about us and I would say that I try to be more flexible. Like I was like, yeah, I'm going to take this on because it just is what is needed right now. And the same way that my mom is like, she probably didn't necessarily want to like with 8 kids and her youngest kid, I think Naomi was maybe 3 or 4, something like that. 'Cause she wasn't in kindergarten yet. I'm going to go back to school. Like, and at the same time, I have 8 children who are still all at home and all these things. Like, that probably wasn't like the first thing that she thought like would be like so exciting necessarily because it was really hard, I'm sure. But like we said, in the spirit of being flexible and doing what you need to do to get by, like that's what she did. And she did really good at it. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, being honest, but like knowing that sometimes God doesn't work our life in the way that we think it will work. Sometimes God has different plans for us. They're just different seasons. And so sometimes you think your life is going to look one way and God is like, no, I'm going to do this with your life for this season. And you need to be okay with that. And so I think that's kind of what God is doing in our lives right now. Like, I think I'd say quite often, like, oh, I just want to like, I like being at home, okay? I like taking care of our home, taking care of you, taking care of my nephews and nieces, and hopefully our kids one day. Like, I like all of that. Like, it was funny, I was saying it the other day. Like, the other day I worked like 12 hours outside gardening and doing all these things and cleaning and cooking. And after all of that, I was like, wow, I feel good. And it's like different than like if I go and work 12 hours at like my job. It's like, I'm drained. I don't want to do anything. Not to say that I hate my job or anything. It's a very good job. But like, I don't know. I feel like when you're really passionate about something, it like invigorates you and stuff. And that's how I feel like about just being a homemaker,
Sure.
which maybe not all women, I don't think, and I know for a fact not all women feel that way, but that's the way I feel. But at the same time, that doesn't mean I'm going to be stubborn and be like, well, I'm done with working because I don't feel like it. Because right now, like I feel like financially it makes sense for me to be working right now, but just in the place that we are at. So
So, right.
sorry, again, along.
You can tell she's passionate about it. If you have more questions about this topic, you can tell we'd probably like to go with more information. We could share a lot more on this.
Yeah, and
Let's.
I'm
Sorry.
sure I'm offended people already, but who
That's,
cares?
we
That's how
can't
I feel.
we can't help it. This is what we believe. We're taking a stand in one direction,
Yeah.
and when our goal is not to offend, but we're trying to start a dialogue, start a conversation here, and obviously people live in different places. Where I came from in the UK, homemakers are not very common. That it's just the pace of life, the finances, the culture. Yeah, I think it's issues, and it's very dependent on where you live, what's normal in your area. Let's talk to a guy, and I guess I'm asking the question of myself. Let's talk to a guy who wants a more traditional girl, and
Okay.
he's in the dating pool, but then he's now encountered a girl, he wants a career. Should he just write her off? Well, what's the approach? I mean, I guess it's kind of it's kind of weird because I'm asking myself the own question. But what I want to say to guys is the same way you told the girls be flexible. Guys, let's be open minded and let's be open to compromise. Because this same girl who is telling you she wants to pursue her career now, when she has a child down the road, may shift a little bit. She may say she wants her career now, but she doesn't know the future. She doesn't know everything that's going to come. And you saying that you want a traditional woman now, you don't know what your desires are going to be in a few years' time. So don't see it just because a girl is saying, I can never see myself as a homemaker. Now, I wouldn't say that's a red flag to not pursue that relationship.
I think I would agree with what you're thinking, but disagree with what you're saying. Like I see
Why?
what you're thinking, but I disagree with what you're saying in the sense that I don't think that you should marry someone with who they could potentially become.
Well, look,
Like you shouldn't be like, well, once she has a kid, then she'll change. It's like that's a really bad way to enter into marriage.
well, I'm not saying you're betting on her changing. I'm just saying don't think that what. Well, I guess maybe I am saying that. I guess I'm saying don't think that because this is the current priority now, that it's going to be this way for the rest of your life, and
Well,
even your own desires.
I would say don't be with someone who's that stubborn. If a girl is like, no, I will never do this, I will never do that, like that is if you're just taking a step back, that's just an indicator of, if a guy does that too,
Right.
that's just an indicator of a super stubborn person. And like, maybe that's more of the red flag versus like the more minute details in which it works out in whatever conversation you're having. But I would say like, especially if it's something that you're very strongly believe in or very passionate about, like I would love to have my children raised by one of their parents.
Sure.
If that's something that you're very passionate about, then I would say that it wouldn't be the best idea to be with somebody who at the same time is very passionate about like I never want kids, I only want a career. Like I don't think that's a good way to
There has to be some
enter.
joint values.
I think it would be good for both to be flexible. And like I
Right.
think it's a red
That-
flag
that's
if
kinda what
one
I'm
is
saying.
and one isn't, because then the one who's not is going to bowl over the one that is potentially and just like make them do everything that they want to do. Like
Right.
well, and that's just like an overall advice for all of marriage, to be completely honest with you, because you need
Sure.
to have compromise on both sides.
Sure.
So if there's one person who's extremely rigid and not compromising whatsoever, I think that's a red flag. I don't think that they're maybe ready to get married.
Yeah, I think
You know what I
maybe
mean?
to make my point, clearer. I think I'm saying that you don't if just because maybe you're not 100% aligned, like say one of you wants a career but also wants to have children, and one of you wants children and just wants her to be a homemaker, it's like that you are not mutually exclusive. Like you can have a career and have children and maybe have some time at home and some time at work, right? It doesn't have to be black or white. right? You can have your career and have kids, right? It doesn't have to be, you're gonna have my kids and you're gonna have to stay at home. You see what I mean? Like it's not you can have a mix of the two.
Yeah, I guess. I suppose we're not. That's more the subject of do you want to have kids or not, versus the
Traditional
conversation
roles.
of, yeah, the traditional. They're both very important conversations to have. I would say to men who are thinking that way, like when you first said it, I could just visualize like the guy who says like I'm only gonna have my wife when you stay at home and like she has to her place is the kitchen because she's a woman, like that's not good. But I can also see there are like I think that's the extreme stereotype that people love to like point to, like,
Sure.
oh, all men with traditional gender roles are just chauvinistic, terrible men, which is not true. Like I think there are a lot of men that like are more on the line of like I respect my wife and I love my wife and I would want her to be there because I love her and respect her and trust her so much. Like I would want her to be the one with her our children so that they grow up seeing her as an example, and not someone that I don't know.
Sure.
More like that. And but at the same time, like if it is required of us to that we need someone else who works financially because that's what we need, then that we're going to work it out, God is going to be our help. Or if my wife has like a side hustle, that's okay too. Like I have people that I know that they're a stay-at-home mom, but they also have like a side hustle that brings them money. They do it from their house, so it's kind of like they're still a stay-at-home mom, like because they're still at home, but like they have that side hustle. So in a way, they have a little mini job on the side, like
Right.
so. There's definitely lots of compromises and ways to go about it, and like it's going to be unique to each couple. Like it's not something
Right.
that we necessarily can prescribe. This is the best way to do it.
Yeah. I think I'm going to just echo what you said earlier, which I think is the key, is just be open-minded. Like, don't, just because somebody says they want to be a homemaker, assume it's going to be X, Y, and Z. Like, it
Right.
can look so many different ways.
Right.
You can homeschool, you cannot homeschool. You can have a side business, you cannot have a side business. You can go back to, you can maybe do part-time school or something.
Right.
There's so many different ways it could go. So I think we have thoroughly addressed this
Yes, and we
topic.
have run out of time. So if we said anything that you don't agree with, or maybe you have more questions about, like, what did you mean when you said that? Please let us know. Not everything we said is totally complete or said in the most perfect manner. So you know
Sure.
that some things we might have intended them one way, but they came out a different way. So let us know. And thank you for joining us on
Sure.
the Sweet Pea and Bam and Sweet Pea, however it is. We'll see you again next time.
Bye.